Hi again. This is the first of a three-part session on using window light to get great looking pictures. No other lights involved, so it's nice and simple. Now, you'll hear me say throughout the course that the larger the light source in relation to your subjects, the softer the light. Soft light is generally preferred for portraits as it tends to improve the look of the subject's skin, and unlike a hard light, you avoid harsh shadows and shiny bits on the subject's forehead, cheeks and nose. You can recognise a hard light by the hard edges to the shadows. So for example, although the sun is quite a large light source, because it's 93 million miles away, in relation to your subject, it's quite small. And so if you go outside during the day, especially at midday, the shadows from the sunshine will have a very hard edge to them. Which brings me neatly on to windows. We're in a lovely local studio with a lovely large window, but even in a small room, there's a good chance you'll have a large window, perfect for producing soft portrait light. You have to be careful though that the sun's not streaming in, so choose a cloudy day or from a north-facing window, or a south-facing one if you live in the southern hemisphere. Now there's various ways of using window light. You can shoot side on so that you and your subject are at the same distance from the window. That is, you're kind of parallel to the window, give or take. Another way is to shoot with your back to the window so that your subject is facing the window. Or you can even shoot towards the window, and I'll be demonstrating each of these methods in this sequence of 3 videos. In this first video, I'll shoot parallel to the window for a slightly more dramatic effect. Why is it dramatic? Well, it's because when the light direction is from the side, there's going to be light on one side of the face and shadow on the other side of the subject's face, like on my face now. I have the lovely Boo with me today to model for us, and she's from France.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd love to direct her in her native tongue, but with my schoolboy French, we'd probably end up with some very strange poses. So we'll stick with English. Okay, so we'll start with Boo, say about 6 feet from the window. Now that's a good starting point. The closer your subject is to the window, the more contrast there'll be between the lit side of the face and the shadow side. So 1 or 2 feet from the window is a little too close, unless you're going for a more dramatic, contrasty look, which maybe we'll try later. If she's too far away, the light will go flatter, not as crisp, and there won't be a discernible difference between the lit side of the face and the shadow side. But, you know, this can also be quite a flattering type of look, so we'll give that a try later too. But also we want the light to come from above, so if your subject is as tall as a window, try a seated position so that the light hits her from say about 45 degrees. Okay, if you've watched my video about lighting patterns, you'll know that I prefer short lighting where the side of the subject's face closest to the camera is the shadow side. So I'm going to ask Boo to turn her face towards the window slightly, and there you can see that kind of lovely S-shaped curve on the shadow side of her face. But also for some shots, she's going to turn her body the other way into the room. So if you can just turn with your feet towards me, that's it. And then now look out the window again, beautiful. And now, because of the light is skimming across her body, it will skim across the dress or the top rather than being exposed to the full glare of the window. Now that's especially important if she's wearing a light coloured top or dress. There you go, catch this. Put that on, Bo. You see now, if you turn with your feet towards me slightly, turn down, you can see how the light skims across the top. Whereas now if you turn all the way round towards the light, the other way, towards the light, you can see there's a chance that the dress, the top, may blow out. And also, if you turn with your feet towards me again, and now look out the window, and with the torso facing one way and the head facing another, that puts the body into a nice position, you know, when compared with the body and head facing the same way. Okay, so we're ready to start taking pictures. Just a little bit of information about my camera settings. I'm in manual mode. I've got a 42.5 f1.7 lens on the camera, which is equivalent to an 85mm lens in old film terms. I'm shooting wide aperture with a wide aperture f1.7 so that I can blur out those nice straws in the background. 200ths of a second, ISO 320. Let's see how I get on. Right, now, if she moves closer to the window, now we expect to get a lot more contrast. And if you get in really close, I'll keeping exactly the same, let's move this back slightly, keeping exactly the same settings, what we should find is, yeah, as I thought, it's overexposed, isn't it? Just by maybe 1 or 2 stops overexposed. So by reducing the exposure, I should be getting a lot more contrast, because the lit side will go darker, which is what we want, but also the shadow side will start looking very dark as well. So just a few shots now, shooting at say 400th of a second. If you move back a tiny bit, I'll get that lamp in, which looks quite nice. Wow, look at that. These look great. I love these pictures. But because they are very contrasty, you have to be careful with your choice of subject. Boo is obviously very young with a beautiful complexion, but this type of light is not very forgiving for the more mature amongst us. But you could maybe go for something different and shoot, say, an older man, show his lines and the lived-in look. Get it right and you'd get real drama.